watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Molondo.
For donkey's years, I'm sure you have heard it that agriculture is Uganda's backbone. About 70 to 80% of this country's population does depend directly and indirectly on agriculture. Are we doing enough to try and make good use of this, if you like, potent force that we have in this country? 48.9% of East Africa's arable land is here in Uganda. What are we doing about that? A couple of other things as well. Coming up on the big story. Joining me this morning is AlHaji Mamodo Jallow. He's the country representative of FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, sir.
You, as FAO, have been here for quite a bit of time, and you have been monitoring events. Everybody keeps talking about the kind of potential we have in this country, but for some reason, we do not seem to reap quite a great deal. What do you think we are getting amiss?
Agriculture is a big sector. We have to understand that, and there are a lot of things that should come together to actually get the potential that is required, and it takes time to put those things together. And you have to understand also that the country went through quite a bit of challenges, and that included infrastructure. And then the government was doing quite a lot in opening up the infrastructure so that we can have access to the farms and then have access to the markets. So those things are now picking up. And at the same time, being a composite sort of affair, they're also trying to get the inputs right. And the inputs in agriculture, they're from policy all the way to extension services, all the way to inputs, and also the organization of the people who would actually do the farming. So you can see there's a gradual process, and now at least the potential is coming out to some extent.
Potential coming out, you say. Some people will tell you that, look, Uganda has potential to be the food basket of not just the region, but Africa at large. Do you believe that?
Yes, I believe that. Because the
so how
soil,
do you make that happen then?
The soil is fertile, there is rainfall, the climate is conducive to agriculture. So it's just a question of now putting, like I said, the things together, creating the enabling environment that will give them the required support that will get things outside. Because when you say also being bread basket, it means also that you have to get the products that the people outside will actually acquire or buy. And that requires standards. So you have to build up the standards. So it's not only selling it here, but then getting to sell it outside, you have to get those standards right. And that is also being done right now to get people to be aware of the market outside. Because the advantage in that is that recently people got to know that they can sell, for example, to South Sudan. And that encouraged a lot of people to develop sort of like farmland or products that will sell in South Sudan. And that picked up quite well before the crisis came in South Sudan. So the other countries also, Kenya, for example, people get to sell things to Kenya. But then, like I said, again, you have to get the standards right to be able to get to that market.
I know you have frequent interactions with government. You're working out a 5-year strategic plan with them. Sometimes we think that maybe our priorities are the wrong side up, and maybe that's where you could come in and give advice to government, some kind of advice related to agriculture. When you look at, for example, how much we do allot to agriculture in this country, it's a niggardly figure, and that worries many persons. Of course, government will say that, look, when we inject money into infrastructure, into roads, that's tethered to agriculture. Do you see a correlation?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned at the beginning about infrastructure, that it's very important to get the infrastructure right for the farming communities. Because as I mentioned, a lot of people were producing in places like Western Uganda. If I take that as an example, there was a lot of matoke being grown there. But then even getting it to Kampala was a challenge because the road was not suitable. And you know this matoke is actually brought in by trucks, and they need good roads, obviously. But now that the road is better, you can see probably more matoke coming into the urban markets. So that's why infrastructure is very important. And when the roads are okay, that also facilitates access for extension service personnel, and also the input dealers can get access to the farmers. The farmers also can get access to markets where they can get inputs, better inputs that they can use, especially seeds and the rest. So the infrastructure is really important for farmers.
There are people that have come out to lambast this whole, Uganda is agriculture, and so we should focus a great deal on that, and they will say that, look, agriculture is an antiquated sector that we need to slowly but surely move away from, begin to manufacture cars, begin to, be a lot more high-tech and that kind of thing. How do you respond to those?
No, I don't think that's quite right, because manufacturing cars, those things need skills as well, and you have to train people to do that. The agriculture has been here and is taking care of a lot of livelihoods. I think it will be here, I think, for quite a while, and we have to really pay attention to it.
Do you think we are paying attention?
Yes, we are paying attention to it, and I think government is doing quite a bit on agriculture, because the Ministry of Agriculture is doing its own share of addressing issues in agriculture by addressing fake seeds, for example, making sure that we have the right seeds. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the input in agriculture is very important. And the input, especially seeds, fertilizer, and chemicals and things like that, are important for the farmers. So some people take advantage of that and bring in fake seeds, bring in fake chemicals and stuff. So these are things that would have to be addressed, because it disadvantages the farmers.
You don't speak for government, and that's why I don't want to put you in the spot. But when you say that quite a bit is being done, I don't know, sometimes we don't quite see it, because if to date we still export our stuff raw, coffee, for example, we export it raw, and then it comes back refined, we get it on the shelves of supermarkets at stupendous prices, and we're thinking, wait a minute, why? Why can we not add value to these things? Why should we be importing them, rather? We should be able to refine them, add value to them, sell locally, and even export. That's not happening.
Yeah, but government is not supposed to do the value addition. Government is supposed to create the enabling environment for the people to get into value addition. And I think they're encouraging people to do that, because they're giving people information that is required, what they have to do with the coffee, to make sure that the value is added to get the markets outside that are required. So I think that's what government is supposed to do, to create the enabling environment. And they might, they might even give them facilities, for example, tax incentives and things like that, to make it easier for them. And I think from the top going down, the government has been telling people commercial agriculture is the way to go. And the commercial agriculture is tied to value addition also. And I think in several fora, the government mentioned it, that people will have to add value to make a difference, even at the household level.
You've worked out a 5-year strategic plan. What are the highlights therein?
The highlights there are actually the production and productivity of the products that you get from agriculture, from forestry, from fisheries, and to make sure that those really fit into the needs of the agriculture sector in Uganda. And the second part is like the knowledge that is required to get some of these things, like for example, if you have to develop policy or you have to address certain issues in the sector, you have to be well informed. So we try to provide as much information as we can to enable people to make decisions that are really required and that will make a difference in the sector. Now the third part of it is resilience to threats to livelihoods. And that is becoming more and more important because of climate change. So we are working quite well in dealing with the climate change issues, the drought risk and other things that come with it. Because you can see, I'm sure, recent times when you have floods and droughts and things like that that have been caused supposedly, and I think convincingly, by climate change.
Talking of which, debate around GMOs, these genetically modified foods and stuff, organisms generally, it's been intense. And they will tell you that, look, these seeds that we are giving you, they're drought resistant, they can endure any kind of climatic conditions and stuff. But farmers will tell you, look, these things, you cannot replant them. When they grow, you've got to run back to these multinationals, the Monsantos and the like. Somehow we've got to keep running to them to keep, if we want to keep replanting these things. And it's been, quibbling left, right, and center. And of course, nothing conclusive really has been reached. What's your take on this debate?
Now, we've made it clear at FAO that GMO is a national responsibility. We are not giving, sort of advising government on GMO. The government has to take a decision on that. But what we are actually encouraging government to do or countries to do is to look at improved varieties. Now, improved varieties are actually being taken care of in Uganda very strongly because we liaise with NARO, the National Agricultural Research Organization, which has been working very hard at sort of like producing seeds or varieties that are tolerant and resistant. And I think that's the way to go. Now, if the government decides eventually to go on GMO, that's entirely the national responsibility, and we have nothing to say about that. But we will encourage at least NARO to continue what they're doing and make sure that the farmers get the seeds or the inputs that are required that will also address the challenges that we have presently in the sector.
You earlier on said that you agreed that Uganda has potential to be food basket for the region, for the entire Africa, and you went ahead to say that government is doing everything they can to make sure that we glean quite a bit from this sector of agriculture. I don't know, what would your prognosis be? 10 years down the road or that kind of thing, that Uganda will be totally food secure? Because it's not totally food secure, even though we keep hearing that. Because, you know, there are times when there's areas that have plenty, food is even rotting, and then there's drought and people dying off in certain areas. At what point do you see this happening, that as a country, for starters, we are totally food secure? There's enough food in every corner of this country, and then we can get to reach out to the region and hopefully the whole of Africa as well.
No, I think Uganda is food secure. That much I can say, because it depends on what you mean by food security. Well, because getting drought in one end or crop failure in another doesn't mean the country is not food secure, because there is a lot of food around. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it's actually access to the food. So that is being taken care of, because when you say, for example, a corner has a deficit or it has a failure, if you have the means to move the food from other areas, because you'll agree with me that in other areas there are a lot of food.
Absolutely, and abundant. Of course that's what I find exotic.
That's
People
right.
have plenty here,
that's
others
right.
are dying away.
So it's a question of moving it to those areas and also enabling or putting those people in a condition where they can purchase the food that comes from those areas. Because if at all the food is available there and those people don't have the means to buy it, then it creates a problem in accessing it or even utilizing it. So that's the difference here. So the country is food secure, that much I can tell you. There are problems here and there, but those obviously get addressed from time to time, because with either the Office of the Prime Minister mobilizing resources to take care of those, to make sure the people get at least food for that period of time, for that, to fill that gap. And that I think will continue, because there is a lot of arable land in Uganda, and the weather permitting, the land will be used. And now you can also say that labor is decreasing probably in some agricultural areas. But then that is now being compensated by putting in technology that will address that will enable individuals or communities to open up more land and also get more produce from the land. And the animal traction is a very attractive option for Uganda. And people are now getting more and more into that. Getting oxen, ox plow, and as accessories that can really make them open up more land, produce more for the people, because the population is also growing. So we have to look at technology more and more to be able to address those.
All right,
and this is what will produce the surplus that you're talking about at the national level, and also people get more to sell outside. But then we have to also concomitantly address the issue of quality, because it's the quality that will get these people the outside market and also get them the resources that can come from that.
All right, so as we wrap this up, what would be your final word of advice to government, to farmers out there?
To farmers out there, I think I will advise them to obviously take what is being sort of given to them in terms of improving their means of producing, because the reason why I'm saying that is they have their own knowledge and it's quite useful. But we, that means the government and partners, try to help them to improve those technologies and make sure that they can benefit more from the sector.
All right. Mr. AlHaji. No, they don't add Mr. to AlHaji. It's a title already.
No,
AlHaji
mine is a name. It's not a
Is
title.
it a name?
Yes. Mine
That's
is a
interesting.
name, so
But thanks a bunch for talking to us this morning.
it's a pleasure being here.
All right, coming up is my opinion. There's many things that I'm not good at. Many of them, a plethora of them. But there's things that I am good at, and I often like to focus on those, keep improving, keep getting better at them. And look, as a country, there's things that we are good at, there's things that we are not good at. Agriculture is something that we are good at. We've got potential for this, we have got the comparative advantage. But for some reason, we are not putting our money where our mouths are. There's a plethora of talk, but there's a paucity when it comes to action. And here I'm looking at in totality, government, the farmers, and so on. I look at young people that have inherited land, you know, large chunks of land somewhere in the villages, but they sell off this land, come and buy borders, and they are roaming the city all over the place. I think we need to get back to the basics. Yeah, that's very important. Uganda has 48.9% of East Africa's arable land. That's nearly half of it. We need to make good use of this land. That will do for today's big story. Many thanks for joining us. Coming up in a bit is Everyday Life.
You're watching Morning at NTV.